The world today feels like a battleground for opposing forces, but one conflict rises above all others: empathy versus narcissism. This struggle, which transcends politics, culture, and generations, is both a societal phenomenon and a deeply personal one. It can be felt in the way we interact with each other, how we treat the planet, and how we envision the future. The question that looms large is, who will win this great war? To understand the forces at play, we need to first understand the nature of empathy and narcissism. Empathy, the capacity to put oneself in another's shoes, to feel the joy and pain of others as if it were our own, lies at the heart of human connection. It allows us to bridge gaps, to care for others, and to act not merely out of self-interest but for the greater good. Empathy is the foundation upon which community is built, the glue that holds us together in times of joy and distress. Narcissism, on the other hand, is driven by an excessive need for admiration, a sense of entitlement, and a lack of genuine concern for others. It is a force that fosters a culture of individualism at its most extreme, where the self is placed above all else, and where the feelings, struggles, and needs of others are trivialized, or worse, completely ignored. Narcissism seeks validation and control, demanding the spotlight without truly caring for those in the shadows. The tension between these two forces is not new. History has always been a tale of competing drives, of compassion and connection versus self-obsession and power. Yet in today's world, this conflict has taken on a sharper, more visible form. Social media, economic disparity, and global challenges have amplified the stakes. It's not just a philosophical debate anymore, it is the defining crisis of our time. Empathy is under siege. In a culture where success is measured by the number of followers, likes, and public accolades, narcissism has found fertile ground. Platforms designed for connection have, ironically, become breeding grounds for self-promotion. The algorithmic infrastructure rewards the loudest voices, the most outrageous claims, and those who relentlessly put themselves forward, often at the expense of authenticity and genuine connection. It's easy to see why narcissism seems to be winning. It's the faster, easier path, an expressway to momentary validation, even if the destination is ultimately hollow. At the same time, empathy struggles to find its voice in this cacophony. It demands a different kind of courage, the courage to listen, to sit with discomfort, and to engage in meaningful, often unglamorous acts of kindness. It requires attention in a world that is continually distracted. Empathy doesn't come with instant rewards or viral fame. It's not something you can capture in a soundbite or a click. Instead, it operates quietly in the background, asking for patience, presence, and vulnerability. In a world obsessed with the self, this approach can seem almost anachronistic. Yet, empathy persists. For every celebrity influencer shouting their achievements, there are countless quiet heroes working tirelessly in hospitals, shelters, classrooms, and neighborhoods. These are people whose stories are rarely told but whose contributions are essential for the survival of our communities. They remind us that, despite the noise, empathy is still alive. It may not trend on Twitter, but it is there in the silent gestures: the neighbor offering groceries, the stranger donating to someone in need, the listener who takes the time to understand. The question of who will win, empathy or narcissism, depends largely on how we, as individuals and as a society, choose to respond to the challenges we face. Climate change, social injustice, and economic inequality are all crises that demand collective action, empathy, and a willingness to prioritize the common good over individual gain. These are problems that cannot be solved by self-interest alone. They require us to think beyond ourselves and to recognize our shared humanity. However, the forces of narcissism have proven to be resilient and adaptable. There is a seductive power in the narratives that glorify self-sufficiency, competition, and the idea that one's worth is measured by material success and external validation. It is no coincidence that populist leaders around the world have risen by tapping into the fear and self-interest of the masses, offering simplistic, ego-driven solutions to complex problems. They speak to the part of us that wants to protect what is ours, that fears the other, and that seeks an easy path to power and influence. And yet, history also shows that empathy has an undeniable power of its own. When faced with great suffering, people often rise to the occasion, transcending their self-interest to help others. The response to the COVID-19 pandemic, for instance, showed both the best and the worst of humanity. While there were those who hoarded resources and spread misinformation, there were also countless stories of people sacrificing their comfort and safety for the well-being of others. The healthcare workers who put themselves on the line, the volunteers who organized aid, and the neighbors who checked in on one another are all reminders of what empathy looks like in action. What makes this war between empathy and narcissism particularly complex is that it is not fought on a distant battlefield, it is fought within each of us. We all have both empathetic and narcissistic tendencies. The challenge is to recognize these forces within ourselves and to consciously choose which one we want to nurture. Empathy requires us to confront our own vulnerabilities, to acknowledge our interconnectedness, and to let go of the illusion of absolute control. It asks us to see the world not just as it relates to us, but as a shared space where our actions have consequences for others. Narcissism, in contrast, feeds on our insecurities and fears. It promises to shield us from vulnerability by elevating us above others, by convincing us that our needs and desires are the only ones that truly matter. It can be alluring, especially in a world that often feels uncertain and threatening. But in the long run, narcissism isolates us, leaving us disconnected and unfulfilled, even as we chase after the next fleeting moment of recognition. The outcome of this great war may ultimately depend on how we choose to raise the next generation. Children are not born empathetic or narcissistic, they learn these behaviors by observing the adults around them. If we model empathy, if we show them that caring for others is a strength, not a weakness, they are more likely to grow into empathetic adults. If, instead, they see a world where self-promotion, competition, and material success are valued above all else, they will internalize those values. Our educational systems, our media, and our cultural narratives all play a role in shaping these young minds. One of the key battlegrounds for empathy and narcissism is how we use technology. Technology has the potential to bring us together, to foster understanding and empathy by connecting us with people from different backgrounds and perspectives. But it also has the potential to isolate us, to create echo chambers where our views are reinforced and where the lives of others are reduced to mere content. The design of our technological platforms, whether they prioritize connection over engagement, depth over clicks, will significantly influence the direction of this conflict. Another crucial aspect is the role of leadership. Leaders, whether in politics, business, or community organizations, have a tremendous influence on which values are promoted and rewarded. Empathetic leaders, who prioritize the well-being of their people over their own personal gain, set a powerful example. They show that leadership is about service, not power, and that the true measure of success is not how much you have achieved for yourself, but how much you have contributed to the lives of others. In contrast, narcissistic leaders create cultures of fear, competition, and division, where empathy is seen as a liability rather than an asset. There is no simple answer to the question of who will win this great war. Empathy and narcissism are both deeply embedded in the human psyche, and both have their appeal. Empathy connects us, gives our lives meaning, and enables us to create a world where everyone can thrive. Narcissism, however, promises individual success, power, and the avoidance of vulnerability. The outcome will depend on the choices we make, collectively and individually, every day. In our interactions with others, we can choose empathy by listening, by seeking to understand rather than judge, and by recognizing that our actions affect those around us. In our use of technology, we can choose to seek out diverse perspectives rather than retreating into comfortable bubbles. In the leaders we support, we can choose those who speak to our better angels rather than our fears and insecurities. And in how we raise our children, we can choose to teach them that true success is not about what you have, but about who you are and how you treat others. The war between empathy and narcissism is not one that will be won overnight. It is an ongoing struggle, one that requires vigilance, courage, and hope. But if history has taught us anything, it is that empathy, though often quieter and less glamorous, has a resilience and a power that should not be underestimated. It is the force that has enabled us to survive and to thrive as a species, and it is the force that can help us navigate the complex, interconnected world we now inhabit. In the end, the question is not just who will win, but which side each of us will choose. Will we choose the easy allure of narcissism, with its promise of self-aggrandizement and control? Or will we choose empathy, with its quiet strength, its courage, and its capacity to bring us closer to one another? The choice is ours, and the stakes could not be higher. The Great War has begun, but the outcome is still unwritten.